Chapter 3. Things that must shortly take place. You should be deeply concerned about world events today. Why so? Because this world cannot escape God's execution of judgment. But you can escape. You can do this by making yourself no part of the world that is doomed to destruction. This does not mean adopting an austere, monastic way of life. It means that while enjoying a wholesome, meaningful life, you separate yourself from political corruption, from greedy commercialism, and from God dishonoring religion, as well as from violent and immoral behavior. At the same time, you must follow God's high standards of conduct and seek to do His will. John 17:14 through 16, Zephaniah 2:2 and 3, Revelation 21:8. The Bible book of Revelation shows how important it is for you to apply yourself in these respects, making changes as necessary in your way of life. Paragraph 2. The Apostle John introduces this grand prophecy with the words, a revelation by Jesus Christ, which God gave him, to show his slaves the things that must shortly take place. Revelation 1:1. A. So it was the resurrected Jesus Christ who received his weighty message from God. Far from being a part of a mystic trinity, Jesus is here shown to be subject to his Father, in the same way the slaves making up the Christian congregation are subject to Jesus Christ, so that they keep following him wherever he goes. Revelation 14:4, Ephesians 5:24. But who today are truly slaves of God, and how does Revelation benefit them? Paragraph 3. The Apostle John, who wrote down Revelation, describes himself as such a slave. He was the last surviving apostle and one of the select spirit anointed group of slaves that inherit immortal life in the heavens. Today there are just a few thousand of these remaining on earth. God has other servants too, a great crowd of them, men, women, and children, numbering now into the millions, under angelic direction. These are sharing with the anointed slaves and declaring everlasting good news to all mankind. Oh, how all these slaves are expending themselves in order to help the meek ones of the earth to find salvation. Matthew 24:14, Revelation 7, verse 9 14, and 14, and Revelation 14:6, verse 6. Revelation indicates what you must do to benefit from happifying good news. From the happifying good news. Paragraph 4. How could John say, Paragraph 4. How could John say that these slaves would be shown things that must shortly take place? Were not those words spoken more than 1,900 years ago? From the viewpoint of Jehovah, in whose eyes 1,000 years are but as yesterday, 1,900 years is a short time when compared with the eons of time that he spent in creating and preparing the earth for human habitation. Psalm 90, chapter 90 and verse 4. The Apostle Paul wrote of his own eager expectation and hope, for no doubt the reality of his reward seemed close at hand to him. Philippians 1 verse 20. Today, however, the evidence abounds that all the things foretold will take place on schedule. Never before in history has the very survival of mankind been at stake. Only God has the solution. Isaiah 45 verse 21. Paragraph 5. Channel of communication. Revelation 1 verse 1b 2 continues. And he, Jesus, sent forth his angel and presented it, revelation and signs through him to his slave John, who bore witness to the word God gave and to the witness Jesus Christ gave, even to all the things he saw. Thus John received the inspired record through an angelic messenger. He wrote it in a scroll, transmitting it to the congregations of his time. Happily for us, God has preserved it for the encouragement of almost 100,000 congregations of his united servants on earth today. Paragraph 6. God had a channel for communicating revelation in John's day, and John was the earthly part of that channel. Likewise, God has a channel for giving spiritual nourishment to his slaves today. In his great prophecy concerning the conclusion of the system of things, Jesus identified the earthly part of this channel as the faithful and discreet slave, whom his master appointed over his domestics to give them their food at the proper time. Matthew 24, verse 3, 45 through 47. He uses this John class in unlocking the meaning of the prophecy. Paragraph 7. The Apostle John writes that Jesus presented revelation in signs or symbols. These are vivid and thrilling to examine. They depict dynamic activity and should in turn stir us to zealous efforts in making known to others the prophecy and its meaning. Revelation presents for us a number of electrifying visions, in each of which John participated either actively or as an observer. Those of the John class, some of whom have shared for many decades in the fulfillment of these visions, are happy that God's Spirit has unlocked the meaning so that they can explain it to others. Paragraph 8. These visions in Revelation are not presented in chronological order. Each has its own time period of fulfillment. Many of the visions echoed words of earlier prophecies that provide clues as to their interpretation. For example, Daniel's prophecy described four fearsome beasts, explaining that these portraying ruling powers on earth. Hence, we are helped to understand that the beasts of Revelation represent political entities, including those now existing. Daniel chapter 7, verses 1 through 8, and verse 17. Revelation chapter 13, verse 2, verses 11 through 13, and Revelation 17, verse 3. Paragraph 9. John was faithful in bearing witness to the message that God through Jesus Christ gave to him. He described in detail all the things he saw. The John class has earnestly sought guidance from God and Jesus Christ in order to understand the prophecy fully and make known its fine points to God's people. For the benefit of the anointed congregation, and also for the international great crowd that God will preserve alive through the great tribulation. John writes, "Happy is he who reads aloud those who hear the words of this prophecy, and who observe the things written in it, for the appointed time is near." Revelation 1, verse 3. Paragraph 10. You will benefit greatly by reading Revelation, and even more so by observing the things written in it. John explained in one of his letters, "This is what the love of God means, that we observe his commandments, and yet his commandments are not burdensome, because everything that has been born from God conquers the world, and this is the conquest that has conquered the world, our faith." 1 John chapter 5, verses 3 and 4. You can become supremely happy by building such a faith. Paragraph 11. It is urgent that we observe the words of the prophecy, for the appointed time is near. The appointed time for what? For the fulfillment of the prophecies of Revelation, including God's judgment. The time is near for God and Jesus Christ to execute final judgment on Satan's world system. When Jesus was here on earth, he stated that only his Father knew that day or the hour. Looking ahead to the troubles that have multiplied on earth in our day, Jesus also said, "This generation will by no means pass away until all these things happen." So the appointed time for executing God's destruction must be drawing perilously close. Mark 13:8, also verses 30 to 32. As Habakkuk 2 verse 3 states, "The vision is yet for the appointed time, and it keeps panting on to the end, and it will not tell a lie. Even if it should delay, keep in expectation of it, for it will without fail come true. It will not be late." Our salvation through the great tribulation depends on our observing God's prophetic word. Matthew 24, verses 20 through 22.